So in this video, I want to take a look at picking technique. What are the different picking techniques or strategies available to us? What are the pros and cons of the different techniques? And I'm gonna give you my thoughts on what I think is the best picking strategy for a jazz player. So it's not necessarily a video about how to play faster, but rather having a good solid picking technique. So I've made a few exercises for you here that we can take a look at. We're going to take a look at those. And I'm also going to later on in the video talk about some different material that I think is good for working on technique. So lots of stuff to talk about. Let's get started, shall we? So let's take a look at a A major scale. We'll use the same thing for all the different techniques. So just an A major scale, 5th position, 3-note per string. The first picking technique we're going to take a look at is a no-brainer, alternate picking. It's the default picking technique, I guess you could say. So it's no brainer. I'm playing alternating up and down. So here I've set the metronome to 110 beats per minute. That should be pretty easy. So let's try that. So I'm playing 16th notes, even. Not swung, but even 16th notes. So then you would increase the metronome until you find your limit, as it were. So this is 120, it's still not very fast. Make sure that you're relaxed and not tensing up. You could do more hits on each note if you want to. So like... or even 4. That was actually a bit sloppy. So I try to do it. I try to be as relaxed so I almost drop the pick. Okay. Then I would use a timer. I would use I have this egg timer and I would set it to like maybe 3 minutes. 5 minutes if you're ambitious. You don't have to do this like a very long time. I think that's a little bit of a waste of a time. We're looking for quality more than quantity here, right? So you make sure that you're relaxed and you do it properly, good posture and not tensing up. You do it for 3 minutes, then you maybe increase the metronome a little bit. If you want to increase speed, you increase the metronome a little bit day by day until you reach that point where you can't get any faster, but that's a whole other topic. So now what are the pros and cons here? The pros are that it's consistent. It's always the same, regardless of what you're playing. If you're an alternate picker, it's the same. If you're playing arpeggios or you're playing a bebop head or whatever, you're always playing alternate picking. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to change anything for after what you're playing. But what are the cons? Well, it's there's a limit. If you want to play really, really fast, it doesn't really work. Or maybe it does. We'll take a look at that. So another con is that if you play an arpeggio or some... then obviously it's not necessarily the most logical solution. Even though I've seen like videos of, what's his name, Steve Morse play arpeggios with alternate picking and it's ridiculously fast. So it is possible to do that. So I guess some people are more alternate pickers than others. Not super common in jazz. That's another con. It doesn't necessarily fit the jazz idiom, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. But I mean, you have jazz players like Al Di Meola, I guess is a jazz player to some degree, and Mike Stern seemed to be alternate picking, John McLaughlin. But most jazz players, I think, do a combination of different techniques, like John Scofield. Because we're not playing, when we're playing jazz, we're not playing this, right? first off, we're swinging, and we're not necessarily playing scale runs, but we're playing. That kind of stuff. So we're not playing, you know, as if you were like a heavy metal shred kind of guitar player, they play that kind of stuff. You know, I'm not trying to make fun of it. I can't do that at all. But it would make more sense to play alternate picking if you're doing that kind of stuff, right? So let's take a closer look at what we're actually doing. There are two things we really need to think about here. Those two things are the position of the wrist and the number of notes we're playing on each string. Or rather, if we're playing an even or an odd number of notes per string. Those two things are going to decide on how we're going to improve our technique. So if I'm not changing strings, it's a no-brainer, right? Because anybody can do that. It's the reason why picking is difficult is because we're switching strings. So if I want to play this scale, alternate picking, I'm playing an odd number of notes here. 3. If I were to play an even number of notes per string, like let's say a good old pentatonic scale, then alternate picking is great. Because I like to have the wrist in this kind of position, like this angle, as opposed to doing that. I tend to hold the pick like that. So I'm attacking the string from here. I'm doing rest strokes, by the way, here. So every time I'm changing a string, I'm starting with a downstroke. Problem is, as I'm sure you are aware, we don't always do that. We're quite often, or most of the time, we're playing an odd number of notes per string because of the nature of the guitar. Now, let's see what happens. I'm playing 3 notes, down, up, down. Now the pick is resting on the next string, and if I'm alternate picking, I'm supposed to do an upstroke here, right? So that would mean I would have to shift or lift the pick over that string. That's where we're wasting energy. That's not efficient to do that. That's the actual problem. We need to solve that problem. And there are 4 ways you can solve that problem. 4 ways you can solve the problem. The first thing is to just shift the position of the wrist, the angle of the wrist. So then the pick is not stuck there anymore. Whereas before, now I'm lifting the string so the pick is at. There's no obstacle anymore. Now the problem with that is that I have to shift my wrist back and forth. So if I'm starting with the hand in this position, then I have to go like that. So the wrist has to kind of move this way, which a lot of guitar players do that. And I think that's what's called pick slanting. There's a great YouTube channel called Cracking the Code. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that, where this guy, I think his name is Troy, he analyzes a lot of famous guitar players' picking technique with cameras and these fancy video animations and stuff. I can't do that. So he explains this pick slanting problem and how to solve it really, really well. Very, very interesting. I super recommend that channel, even though it's geared towards rock metal players, I guess. But he has some jazz players like Frank Abali and fusion players as well. That it's really interesting. Oznoy, I think, was on that channel. The second way to solve the problem is to don't pick that last note, but hammer on. But that's a little bit of cheating in this sense, but that's another technique. We're gonna get to that later on. But it's not really solving the problem. Or you could play two notes, you make it an even number, so you play each note twice. But that's also cheating. So, or it's not cheating necessarily, but we're not solving the problem. So I actually lied, there aren't 4 ways. But what you can do, as I'm sure a lot of you can see where I'm going with this, don't alternate pick, but let the pick continue. That's the next picking technique. Sweep picking or economy picking. Pretty much the same thing, I guess. So here I have to change the wrist position again on the way back, right? So imagine like you're doing this. I have to shift my angle of the wrist, which I don't like to do that too much. So let's try that. Let's go back to 110 again. So this enables you to play a lot faster. Let's try 150. When we think of sweep picking, we think of the guitar player Frank Gambaldi. He didn't invent this technique, but he made it famous, I guess, and he came up with a system for it, which I'm going to explain. And I remember getting his, it wasn't even DVD, right? It was in the 80s with VHS, really expensive. You bought it and you got it in the mail. It was called Sweep Picking, Monster Licks and Sweep Picking or something like that. And who can resist a name like that? And I remember getting that video or the cassette, and you would practice all this stuff. But I realized that being a strict sweep picker wasn't really for me. So in that video, you can probably still find it. He says that you should play an odd number of notes. But if you go back, when you turn around, you should play an even number of notes for the picking pattern to add up. So he suggests that you do this. When you play that, after you play that C sharp, you should go back and play on the adjacent string. And then he adds a C here. So all the scales here, you have to kind of change something to accommodate for this system. And I remember when I got, even though I got it, I was really young when I got that DVD or the cassette, and I remember I didn't like that idea that you should change what you're practicing in order for it to fit your picking technique. It seemed like a kind of a wrong approach to me. And also I'm going to be a little bit controversial and say that he's kind of wrong there, as that YouTube channel Cracking the Code shows you don't have to do that. If your pick is coming from this position, see if you can see this. Do it really slow here. There isn't really any obstacle there because the pick is coming from above. it's not necessary to do that. So what are the pros and cons of this technique? The pro is obviously it's easier to play fast when you're playing odd number of notes per string anyway, and it's really good for arpeggios. Problem, or the con, is that I find, this is just me, I find that it gets kind of sloppy. I don't get the same articulation and precision that I get if I play alternate picking. Maybe it's just because I'm not doing it enough. Because obviously when Frank Gambale is doing it, it's super, super clear and clean. One really good advice I want to give you is when you're practicing this stuff, if you're practicing an odd number of notes per string, you can always increase the number of hits by 3. So if I play 3 on each, I can still do the same thing. If I'm playing an even number of notes per string, I can double. Right? It's kind of like you're slowing down this hand because you're moving this hand the same way, but this hand is doing it twice as slow. Another advice I want to give you is, I remember when I practiced funk rhythm guitar, then you could really, if you did that for a long time with a metronome or a drum machine or whatever, you're actually working on your alternate picking because you're relaxed, and it's the same idea, right? So, and then I would set the metronome to maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes and just get into it, kind of. After maybe 10 minutes, you kind of feel like you're getting locked in with the time. If you do that a lot, then I remember noticing that my picking got better as a result of doing this all day. That was just a side note. As I said, this is good for like sweeping arpeggios, right? So I have a little exercise for you as a jazz player, because as a jazz players we don't play, this kind of stuff. Sounds more like you're wanting to be Yngwie Malmsteen or something. So here's a little exercise that somebody showed me. I think it's a Kurt Rosenwinkel drill, Kurt Rosenwinkel exercise. So if you're in F, play a fifth and another fifth, and then go up to a second to the A, and the fourth and the fifth. So and then you do the same thing starting on G but reversed. So that's all sweeping, right? So it's like I'm doing this. Then I'm kind of playing F Lydian here, I guess. Then you continue. There it is. Taking this first pattern that I showed you and I'm moving it diatonically in F Lydian. Let's set the metronome to 120 and triplets. Remember here that you can do several hits on each note. was terrible. So I noticed here that this is something I need to work on. I can definitely work on that. So moving on to the next picking technique, you were wondering what is that? Well, it's, in lack of a better word, Gypsy Jazz picking. Let's go back to the major scale. Gypsy Jazz picking is basically the same thing as sweep picking, but you do it the same on the way back. So down, up, down, down, up, down. On the way back as well. So basically the idea is that every time you change strings, you start with a downstroke. You notice I'm letting the string ring here because in that style, you usually try to get the whole guitar to resonate. So you're not necessarily muting the strings in the same way you would otherwise normally would do. What's the pro here? What's the reason for this? Well, in this style you play acoustic guitar most of the time, and you need a lot of volume. You need to cut through the other guitar players and the violin and all that. So you need a lot of volume. So by attacking the string with rest strokes like this, you get the guitar to project more, and you get, plus it sounds like that style, sounds like that genre when you're playing like that. So I think that a lot of the earlier, not just Django Reinhardt and those guys, but a lot of the earliest jazz players, they did that. They played more or less. I think Charlie Christian did that too. Played mostly downstrokes. I don't think there's any footage of him playing, so we can't know for sure. But check out the earlier players. I think the whole idea of alternate picking came later with certain method books and like the Berkeley method books. I could be wrong about this, so don't quote me on this in your PhD thesis or whatever, but it gives you more volume and it's more natural to do a downstroke, and you get more stability. That's why this is good. So I used to practice this a lot when I kind of switched to playing Django style music. I'm not an orthodox, traditional, hardcore Gypsy Jazz player, but I noticed when I worked on that stuff, it really helped my overall technique. So it's worth to look into. I'm not an expert. I'll recommend some videos that I think are really good if you want to look into this stuff more. And also, the difference between this and sweep picking, I think, except that it's the same in both directions, is that you're not, sweep picking is kind of like you're just letting the pick fall like that. It's like you're sweeping the strings. But with this style, the Gypsy Jazz picking, you're still supposed to kind of attack. I could be wrong about that too, but it's almost like your string is bouncing, or the pick is bouncing off the string. So if you go over the different techniques, alternate picking would be this. And sweep picking in this. And Gypsy Jazz picking. Remember I said earlier that there are 4 different techniques. Now you're wondering what's the 4th. So remember also that I said that I prefer to keep my wrist like that. Like a Gypsy Jazz player. What if I wanna do that on the way back? I could do this. Same as economy picking or Gypsy Jazz picking, ascending, but then on the way back I use pull-offs. closer to what I think I'm actually doing when I'm playing. I'm not even that sure. I think I do a little bit of hammer-ons on the way up too. But I could do, so sweep picking on the way up and using legato or pull-offs on the way down. That sounds a little bit more like jazz to me, like you could be swinging. You want that satisfying snap when you're pulling off without bending the string so that you go out of tune. But that's a different topic. Then we're talking about this hand all of a sudden. So that's a different lesson right there. I might make a video about legato playing. So the different exercises I created, it's just like take each one of these and just do like finger drills. So I came up with a different exercise for each and one of these techniques, so you can really focus in on this hand. So you've all probably done this. So I'm just playing all 4 fingers, next string, then the reversed fret up. So that would be for an even number of notes per string, so I could do that with alternate picking. And I don't have to shift my wrist. Could do more than one. Right? Something I notice with students sometimes is if I ask them to do start on a different place in the beat, they have a hard time sometimes to do that, and that's not a good thing. It should be just as easy, regardless of where you're starting. That also gives you a little bit more of a jazz feeling, that kind of forward motion, right? Instead of daga 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 daga, but daga 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 daga. You know what I mean? Like it's going somewhere. So the difference between like if I'm playing arpeggios like this, as opposed to this, I think that's much better, the latter one, because it sounds like more jazz phrasing, because again you get that forward motion. So that's alternate picking. So then you would do that. You would use a metronome. When I went to MI, they call this exercise a quasi-chromatic. Is that how you pronounce that? Quasi or quasi-chromatic? Because it's like almost a chromatic scale. You need a bunch of exercises like this. I think it's a good idea to have. So where can you find that? There's this famous or infamous 10-hour guitar workout session from Guitar World 1990. I actually had that issue. I remember I had that. I don't think I have it anymore. So there's like this. You can find it PDF. It's all over the internet. Just a bunch of drills like that you can go over. It's supposed to take 10 hours or 8 hours or whatever. So I find that the best guitar technique material you'll find in the world of the classical guitar, right? But it doesn't fit what we're doing as a jazz player, because we use a pick most of the time. Well, that's a whole different thing if you're using your fingers, and it's also different for this hand as well. So some of the best books are for classical guitar, but it's not necessarily the best for what we're trying to do. Also, you'll find a lot of good stuff actually in heavy metal genre. One of the best books I've seen, I don't have it here, but is I think his name's John Petrucci. I'm not at all, like, I don't know anything about his music because I don't listen to that music, but he has a book called rock discipline, I think, with some really, really good exercises. For example, this one. So it's a picking exercise with string skipping. I do that all the time when I'm warming up. Apparently not recently, because that was kind of sloppy. That's really good stuff, I think. Even though it's not, jazz, it doesn't matter. It's just, good stuff. So then let's do the sweep picking or counter picking. So I'll just do 3 notes per string instead. So let's increase the metronome a bit here. 140, because we're going to do triplets. Let's do the Gypsy Jazz picking. So you're noticing there that the strings are resonating, because I'm not used to muting the strings when I do this, because it's a whole different thing if you're playing an acoustic guitar. You kind of want the strings to resonate. That's why we often play in like E minor and keys like that when you're playing Django stuff, right? Because you want the guitar to really sound as much as possible. And then lastly, the one where I'm combining the pull-offs. Notice I'm doing rest strokes, but when I'm playing the alternate picking, I'm not doing rest strokes, I don't think. So it's a combination of everything. When you're actually playing, you probably use a combination of all those things. And remember, you can do more than one hit on each. And don't just always start on beat 1. Try different places in the bar. Try starting on different beats. So if you want to increase your speed, you would do this every day and increase the metronome a little bit day by day. Some people say that, oh, that doesn't work. The increasing the metronome thing doesn't work. It's like, yeah, it works. That's like saying, if I run a little bit every day, I'm gonna get in better shape. Yeah, I think what they mean, people that say that, is that once you hit that spot where you can't get faster, which there's like that limit, then trying to increase the metronome more, obviously it's not going to work. So then you have to use different strategies, and I have made videos about that in the past. Some of the first videos I made that people actually watched was about that, how to get over that plateau or whatever. But that's a different topic. That's not what we're talking about in this video. So now some of you are saying, or like I know some of you hate this stuff because it's so not musical, but I don't think like that, because for me that would be like saying, let's say I want to learn soccer. I go to this first soccer practice session and the instructor tells me to do push-ups, and I'm like, what, push-ups? That's not soccer. But the idea is that the push-ups are going to help me play soccer better. So, you have to do boring things to be able to do fun things, kind of. Also, this again is gonna maybe trigger some people, but I find see if you agree with me or not, that sometimes when people say, oh, I hate those, I don't want to do those kind of exercises because they're not musical, what they're actually saying is, I don't want to do those exercises because I'm kind of lazy. But you could do similar things with more music stuff. So, for example, violin. As I said earlier, classical music is great, obviously, but I do play classical guitar, but it's not the same thing, so it doesn't really work for what we're doing. But violin etudes or capriccious, Kreuzer's violin etudes are really good. So single note lines, not always single note, but most of it is single note lines. I actually have a Kreutzer etude for guitar pick method by Alan Hanlon. Somebody sent this to me. Single string etudes to improve left and right hand techniques. So I'll play one of these so you'll get an idea. It's just like uninterrupted 16th notes. So this is Alan Hanlon. What a dude. So something could sound like this kind of thing. Like that. So it's kind of like scales, but with some kind of musical personality to it. Another book like that is Bach's Sonatas and Partitas for the violin. I saw a clinic with Adam Rogers, who, by the way, is not an alternate picker. It's a good example. Somebody uses a little bit of everything. It's like his picking is a little bit all over the place. And he played this one, which is a G minor one. And so on. So it's also really good for improving your reading, right? And so there are different, you could either decide I'm gonna alternate pick the whole thing, or you could use different techniques and write out a picking pattern and try different ones. If you want a more jazz, similar thing but more jazz kind of language, there's this Pat Metheny guitar etudes with just kind of like that, right? It's uninterrupted eighth notes, but in jazz we play eighth notes most of the time. So I'm not gonna play anything from that book because I'm gonna make I might make videos about all these books in more detail, talk about how I use them in my practice. That's all I had to say about picking. That was a long video, and I hope that gave you some ideas on how and what to practice. Let me know in the comments if you think this was useful, and I shall see you next time.